Hello and welcome to Hydra-Stop University. In this video, we'll show you the proper installation techniques for the Hydra-Stop Insta-Valve 250 insertion valve. Our test stand is set up with a 12-inch Insta-Valve 250. We'll cover all the steps from valve body installation to final operation. But before we get started, here are a few words about safety.
This instructional video is to be used only as a training aid. It is not intended as a replacement for the operating instructions or Hydra-Stop training. Installation operation should be performed by properly trained personnel. Before beginning any Hydra-Stop installation, be sure to read, understand, and follow the operating instructions in the manual. Never attempt to install Insta-Valve 250 insertion valves at pressures greater than 150 psi if equipment is not rated for 250 psi installation. This includes the temporary gate valve and the Hydra-Tapper machine. Contact Hydra-Stop at 708-389-5111 if you have any questions regarding equipment PSI ratings. Remember, always use appropriate safety equipment. The following is a list of recommended tools for IV250 installation. Hydra-Tapper tapping machine, 12-inch insertion housing, P20 adapter, hydraulic or air drive motor, guide plate, 12-inch temporary gate valve, 55-inch saw mandrel, 59-inch insertion tool, test flange, 9.8 or 11.8-inch shell cutter, 19 or 30-inch feed screw, carbide or twist pilot bit, stop collar, 10 and 12-inch alignment gauge kit. Other required tools include 3/4, 1 1/4, 1 5/16, and 1 7/16 opened end wrenches, 15/16, 1 1/4, 1 5/16, 1 7/16 deep well sockets, 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch drive, 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch drive socket wrench, 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch drive torque wrench, T-handle hex wrenches, 1/4, 3/16, 5/16, and 3/8, pipe wrench, level, wire brush, Teflon tape, tape measure, spray bottle containing a water and soap solution, paint marker. A recommended tool list can be found in the Insta-Valve 250 installation instructions. Section 1. Mounted pressure test valve body on the pipe. Inspect the valve body to ensure no damage has occurred during shipment or storage. Locate the valve cartridge and the box containing the stainless steel mounting hardware. Store in a clean, safe location. Measure pipe outside diameter where the IV250 is being installed to ensure the correct insertion valve is being used. Thoroughly clean the pipe surface where the valve body will be installed and inspect for flaws, such as gouges, protrusions, or excessive corrosion. Irregular surfaces should be avoided to assure maximum gasket sealing. Lubricate the top and bottom of the pipe and mat and branch gaskets with a soap water solution. Ensure branch gasket is adequately lubricated. Mount the top half of the valve body on the pipe in the position required for permanent installation. Do not rotate the top half of the valve body after it is positioned on the pipe. Install the bottom half of the valve body using the stainless steel bolts, washers, and nuts. Using a torque wrench, tighten bolts in the proper sequence as shown in this chart. Ensure gaps between top half and bottom half of the valve body are the same front to back and side to side within 1/8 of an inch. After bolts have been tightened to recommended torque, wait 10 minutes to allow the gasket to fully seat and retighten bolts to recommended torque. Recommended torque values are shown in this chart. Fill the valve body with water. Install the test flange. Perform a pressure test to ensure a complete seal between the valve body and pipe. Do not use a compressible medium such as air. Minimum test pressure 1.5 times the system working pressure. Maximum test pressure 375 psi. Ensure completion plug set pins are flush with the ID of the flange. Section 2. Installing the temporary gate valve. 10 and 12-inch IV250s use the 12-inch temporary gate valve. Temporary gate valves are single-direction valves and must be positioned top up. The 12-inch temporary gate valve must be installed with the red bar facing up. If possible, avoid positioning the valve at the true 3, 6, 9, or 12 o'clock position to allow access to the completion plug pins. Bolt the temporary gate valve to the top of the IV250 flange using the bolts, nuts, and washers provided with the installation equipment. We recommend using a cross-tightening pattern. Ensure that a green fiber gasket is installed on the top of the temporary gate valve. Fully open the temporary gate valve. Section 3. Setting up the Hydra-Tapper. Place the Hydra-Tapper on the P20 component. Bolt the Hydra-Tapper to the P20 using the bolts and nuts included with the Hydra-Tapper equipment. Select the proper size saw mandrel. Tapping of the 10 and 12-inch IV250 requires the 55-inch long saw mandrel. Select the proper size shell cutter. Cutter sizes can also be referenced on the back of each cutter. Installation of 10-inch IV250 requires the 9.8-inch cutter. Installation of the 12-inch IV250 requires an 11.8-inch cutter. Do not use red painted shell cutters to install the IV250. Hydra-Stop side tap shell cutters are shipped painted red. Red painted side tap shell cutters are 1/3 inch undersized for side tapping. Select the proper size pilot drill. Installation of 10 and 12-inch IV250s require the 3/4 inch by 10 and 5/16 inch long pilot drill. Tapping of PVC or steel pipe will require a twist-style pilot bit. Failure to use the proper sized or type of pilot drill will result in a failed installation. Loosen and remove the Allen head pilot drill retaining set screw located on the side of the flange base. Visually locate the tapered relief on the base of the pilot drill. Notice the stop or ledge at the base of the taper. Mark the flat of the taper with a visible marking agent. Align the pilot drill flat with the Allen head set screw and insert the pilot drill through the center of the saw mandrel stud. Confirm you have completely inserted the pilot drill and engage the tapered flat. Once aligned, insert and tighten the set screw. Test pull the pilot drill firmly to assure the pilot is properly locked in place against the ledge. Check the coupon retaining clips so they move freely. Thread the appropriate shell cutter all the way onto the threaded stud of the saw mandrel flanged end. Back off to align the holes in the base of the shell cutter with the Allen head cap screws and thread them through the holes. Tighten the Allen head cap screws. Make sure the saw mandrel is clean and free of rust or grime. Steel wool can be used to clean and smooth the surface. Lubricate the end of the saw mandrel with a dab of the food-grade lubricant provided with the equipment to help it slide freely through the packing nut assembly. Slide the assembled shell cutter and saw mandrel into the Hydra-Tapper until the saw mandrel flange bottoms out in the P20 component. Hand tighten the clamp lever to keep the assembly in place. Section 4. Installing the Hydra-Tapper for 10 through 12 inch IV250 installation. Using a strap or sling, install the assembled Hydra-Tapper onto the 12-inch temporary gate valve and align the bolt slots. Install and cross-tighten the bolts, nuts, and washers to secure the assembly. Hold and control the exposed saw mandrel, loosen the clamp lever, and slowly lower the saw mandrel down until the pilot drill is resting on the top of the pipe. Ensure the shell cutter spins freely in a clockwise direction. Slide the stop collar over the saw mandrel. Set the cutting depth by measuring from the top of the packing nut assembly to the lower side of the stop collar. Cutting depths are shown in this chart. Tighten the stop collar to the correct measurement. Install the drive unit by lifting it above the saw mandrel and slide it into the 3 guide bars. Install the feed screw by threading it through the top plate of the Hydra-Tapper unit until the opening covers the spindle on the drive unit. When the feed screw makes contact with the drive unit, back off 1 full turn. Assemble the handle assembly and install over the flats at the top of the feed screw and tighten the handles. Section 5. Performing the line tap. Ensure the ball valves on the Hydra-Tapper P2 housing and the P20 housing are open. Connect the drive unit power source to the drive unit. Ensure the drive unit lever control is in the neutral position. Engage the drive unit and confirm the saw mandrel is rotating in the clockwise direction. Slowly turn the handle assembly in a clockwise direction, keeping slight, constant pressure until the tap is complete. Close the ball valves on the P20 housing and the P2 housing of the Hydra-Tapper as water fills the housings and flows from the valves. The tap is complete when the bottom of the stop collar makes contact with the top of the packing nut assembly. Return the drive unit lever control to the neutral position. To ensure the tap is complete, tighten the packing nut assembly clamp lever. Loosen the stop collar. Raise the stop collar 1/4 of an inch. Retighten the stop collar. Loosen the packing nut assembly clamp lever. Advance the feed screw 2 additional turns. Cutter should spin freely, indicating tap is complete. If cutter does not spin freely, or you cannot turn the feed screw the 2 full turns, the tap is not complete. Re-engage your drive motor, tap to the new stop collar position, and repeat these steps until the cutter does spin freely. After ensuring the tap process is complete, be sure the drive motor is in the neutral position and the power source is shut down. Tighten the packing nut assembly clamp lever. Disconnect the drive unit power source. Turn the feed screw in a counterclockwise rotation to allow for drive unit removal. Remove the drive unit. Place a box end wrench over the hex on the saw mandrel and use the wrench as a lever brake to hold in place. Loosen the packing nut assembly clamp lever and allow the pressure to slowly raise the cutter assembly fully into the tapping housing. Lock the saw mandrel in place by tightening the packing nut assembly clamp lever. Close the temporary gate valve. Section 6. Removing the Hydra-Tapper. Relieve the pressure from the Hydra-Tapper by opening the ball valve and discharging the pressure. Unbolt and remove the Hydra-Tapper from the temporary gate valve. Place the Hydra-Tapper in a dry and safe work area. Remove cutter and saw mandrel assembly. Remove the coupon by loosening the Allen head pilot drill retaining set screw. Remove the pilot drill from the saw mandrel stud. Flip the pilot drill and insert it point end through the hole in the coupon past the retaining clips, and use it to pull the coupon out of the cutter. Inspect the coupon for pipe thickness and condition. Remove cutter from the saw mandrel. Section 7. Setting up the Hydra-Tapper for 10 through 12-inch valve insertion with the IV250 alignment gauge kit. Installation of 10 and 12-inch Insta-Valve 250s require the 12-inch insertion housing, the 59-inch long insertion tool, the guide plate, and the stop collar. Stand the insertion housing on a flat surface. Place a green fiber gasket included with your equipment between the insertion housing and the tapping machine P20 assembly. Place the Hydra-Tapper assembly on top of the insertion housing, with the pointed end of the P3 facing the same direction as the step stand of the housing. Cross-tighten with supplied bolts and nuts. Tip and lay the insertion housing and Hydra-Tapper P20 assembly on its stand. The Insta-Valve 250 valve cartridge consists of a top section and a bottom section. The top section and bottom section must be firmly tightened together. Prior to removing operating nut, hold the base of the valve cartridge and with a pipe wrench or valve key, turn the valve stem firmly in the opening direction. Remove the operating nut and the white Teflon washer from the valve stem, and place the end of the insertion tool over the valve stem. Tighten the Insta-Valve 250 valve gate and insertion tool together by turning the knurled end of the insertion tool clockwise until snug. Tighten a 3/4 inch insertion tool lock nut located at the base of the knurled handle. Make sure the insertion tool is clean and free of rust or grime. Steel wool can be used to clean and smooth the surface. Lubricate the end of the insertion tool with a dab of the food-grade lubricant to help it slide freely through the packing nut assembly. Ensure the packing nut assembly clamp lever is loose. Insert the assembled valve cartridge and insertion tool through the insertion housing / tapping assembly until the top of the valve gate is approximately 2.5 inches from the bottom flange of the insertion housing. Make sure the shorter, truncated side of the valve cartridge, marked with a star, is facing upwards. Slide the stop collar over the knurled end of the insertion tool. Align the 3 slots of the triangle-shaped guide plate with the 3 guide bars and slide it over the knurled end of the insertion tool. Set up the Insta-Valve 250 10 through 12-inch alignment gauge for the size being installed. Refer to the alignment gauge instructions shipped with the 10 through 12-inch Insta-Valve 250 alignment gauge kit. Set the curved portion of the alignment gauge within the lock pin groove of the valve cartridge. Slide the valve cartridge and alignment gauge towards the insertion housing until the alignment gauge touches the insertion housing. The 2 gauge pins will seat in the top 2 holes of the insertion housing. Ensure the flat of the alignment gauge arm remains aligned with the truncated side of the valve cartridge. Make a reference mark on the insertion housing at the 12 o'clock position, directly in line with the center line of the alignment gauge. Place the 4.25 inch Insta-Valve 250 insertion depth gauge on the insertion tool. Place one end of the insertion gauge against the packing nut assembly. Slide the stop collar towards the insertion gauge until the stop collar makes contact with the insertion gauge. This automatically sets the proper depth for insertion. Lock the stop collar. Place the guide plate to within 2 inches of the stop collar and lock the clamp lever. Remove the Insta-Valve 250 alignment gauge. lubricate the completion plug O-ring with food-grade lubricant provided with the equipment. Slide the valve cartridge assembly fully into the insertion housing. Tighten the clamp lever on the packing nut assembly to keep the assembled valve gate and insertion tool in place. Section 8. Install Insta-Valve 250 insertion equipment. Ensure the green fiber gasket is between the insertion housing and the temporary gate valve. Safely lift the insertion equipment and place onto the temporary valve. Align the insertion housing reference mark made in a previous step with the point of the pentagon valve body that is in line with the direction of the pipe. You may also utilize the star on the valve as an alignment reference. Also, use the pin plug hole that aligns with the valve body star as an additional alignment reference. Using the bolts, nuts, and washers, cross-tighten the assembly in place. Section 9. Set up the Insta-Valve 250 insertion equipment for equalization. The versatility of the Hydra-Stop system allows for equalization through one of 3 ports. You may utilize the 3/4 inch port on the insertion housing, the 3/4 inch port on the P20 adapter, or the 1/4 inch port on the Hydra-Tapper tap housing. In this video, we will be using the 3/4 inch port on the P20 adapter. Install the proper fitting on the equalization port ball valve. The equalization source will determine the proper fitting size and type. Section 10. Install the Insta-Valve 250 valve cartridge. Loosen the packing nut clamp lever. Lower the valve cartridge insertion tool assembly until it touches the temporary gate valve. Retighten the packing nut assembly clamp lever. It is critical to install the 30-inch feed screw over the knurled spindle of the insertion tool until the feed screw bottoms out on the locking nut washer. Open the tapping housing and insertion housing ball valves and slowly open the temporary gate valve until the insertion housing begins to fill. Stop opening the temporary gate valve. Close the insertion housing ball valve once fluid reaches the ball valve. Wait for fluid to reach the tapping housing ball valve and close the ball valve. Allow the equipment stack to fully pressurize. Fully open the temporary gate valve. Loosen the packing nut assembly clamp lever and begin advancing the valve gate insertion assembly. Advancement will stop when the completion plug O-ring makes contact with the valve body flange. The stop collar will be approximately 2 inches from the top of the packing nut assembly. Confirm this measurement. Pressurize the equipment stack until the pressure in the equipment stack is 5 psi greater than the line pressure. Continue advancing the feed screw until the valve cartridge assembly is completely seated. The valve cartridge assembly is completely seated when the bottom of the stop collar makes contact with the top of the packing nut assembly. Remove pin plugs. Store in a clean and safe location. Lock the valve cartridge assembly in place by cross-tightening the 6 Allen head completion plug pins. Tighten until the Allen head locking pin makes slight contact with the completion plug, approximately 10 1/2 full turns. Back off 1/4 turn on each pin. The figure shows a cross-tightening pattern, which starts with locking pin number 1, followed by locking pin 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You may start with any of the locking pins as number 1, however, be sure to follow a cross-tightening pattern with the remaining pins. Tighten the packing nut assembly clamp lever and retract the feed screw 3 full turns. Remove the equalization source. Slowly open the 3/4 inch ball valve on the insertion housing to relieve the pressure in the installation tap housings. Remove the feed screw. Loosen the insertion tool lock nut 3 full turns and turn the knurl handle of the insertion tool counterclockwise until the insertion tool is disengaged from the valve stem. Loosen the packing nut assembly clamp lever and fully retract the insertion tool. Retighten the packing nut assembly clamp lever. Remove the Insta-Valve 250 insertion equipment and temporary gate valve. Confirm O-ring is placed on top of the IV-250 valve flange. Place the white Teflon washer onto the valve stem. Lubricate the O-ring in the bore of the IV-250 bonnet and install over the valve stem. Align bolt holes. Cross-tighten the bolts, nuts, and washers that came with the Insta-Valve 250. Set the 2-inch operating nut on the valve stem. Thread the operating locking nut onto the valve stem. Locate and install the Allen head pin plugs removed during installation. Use Teflon tape or thread sealant to ensure a seal. Fully open and then close the Insta-Valve 250 to confirm a successful installation. The IV-250 operates at 3 turns per inch, plus or minus 3 turns, depending on the type and condition of the inside diameter of the pipe. Contact your Hydra-Stop Regional Sales Manager or Hydra-Stop Inside Sales if you have any questions. Thank you for watching the 10 through 12 inch Insta-Valve 250 installation procedure video.